Welcome to the Idea Climbing Podcast. If you want to grow your business faster in a meaningful way, servant leadership is for you. I discuss how to adopt servant leadership and apply it to your personal and professional lives in this episode with my guest, Andrew Kolikoff. Andrew helps leaders create better journeys and greater profitability through the elevation of their people, teams, culture, and customer experiences. And he's someone who is considered to be one of the leading thought leaders in the world on servant leadership. We dive into topics including what servant leadership is in its essence, examples of your responsibilities to those around you once you become a servant leader, the one thing above all else that you need to do to become a servant leader, and more golden nuggets of advice. You're going to love this show. Thank you for making time to be on the Idea Climbing Podcast, Andrew. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, sir. I watch your podcast. You're very good at what you do, and it's an honor to be here.
Thank you. We're going to talk about servant leadership or conscious leadership. Before we get into the tips and tricks, the strategies, nuts and bolts, when it comes to servant leadership, again, or conscious leadership, how did you get so good at it? You live it, you teach it. What is your story there?
So I'm going to start in a place, Mark, where maybe your audience may first say, why is he even bringing this up? But I'll tie it all together. So just roll with me. So I grew up in this remarkable home where my parents were actually madly in love, openly affectionate. My brother and I were the center of the universe. My grandparents were exactly the same in love, and they came over every day because they lived nearby. But more than that, my parents lived their lives completely in service, and it was not connected to a faith or organized religion. It was just who they were. And my home was like Grand Central Station every day. Anybody that needed a place to stay, it was the place of joy, love, laughter, and safety for the world. And I thought all this was normal. And it wasn't till I was ejected from the bubble and went to college that I learned two things very quickly. One, the world was not what I thought it was. And two, that my parents were heroes and I didn't know. So it got me very early on in my life to really think about who I wanted to be in this world, in this life. And I always ask people, who are you? Because I don't think people really, the hardest thing to do in life, Mark, is to know what your one thing is, right? What's your one thing? Like that famous scene in the movie City Slickers with Billy Crystal, which some of you may have seen or not seen, but he's in this midlife crisis and he goes to this dude ranch to kind of sort out his life. And, the cowboy, who's the actor Jack Palance, asks him, do you want to know the meaning to life? And Billy Crystal goes, yeah, what's the meaning to life? And he goes like this, one thing. And he goes, well, what's the one thing? He goes, well, that's what you got to figure out. And for me, I decided that my one thing was I had a choice to make, that I could have either been privileged because my dad was also a dentist, on top of all the love we received and all this service around me and helping people. And it was the hub. I mean, all my parents' friends, our friends all hung out there, strangers that needed a place, and that I wanted to pay it forward, that I wanted to live my life in service too. But I was single, young. I didn't have a house. I didn't have a way to replicate what my parents did. So I had to come up with this way that I was going to keep myself accountable to this way of living my life. So I developed this metric, this thing that I was going to live by every day. And so what I decided, I was going to do two things every single day of my life, which I've done now for over 30 years. One is have a coffee, breakfast, lunch, and now Zoom every day with somebody who I've not met or would like to meet or I've been connected to or reconnected to. And two, and I averaged these every day, I would find out what their challenges were, personal, professional. Most people show up for a coffee meeting or go to a networking event with that radio station in their head, WIIFM, what's in it for me? But I changed the radio station in my head to what's in it for them, WIIFT. And I would always only show up to serve, not to get anything. So I would find out what their challenges were, personal, professional, and I would average 5 door openings a day, 5 introductions a day to help them with that challenge. And I would continually do that after meeting them. And what I realized was not only did so much come back to me, I wound up becoming a 40 under 40 in New York City, top 40 business leaders under 40, which is kind of a big deal. And it wasn't because of my status of who I was in business. And I was a chief science officer of an international company. I was a university adjunct professor. It really was not because of what I did. It was because of who I was. And that kind of laid the groundwork for a reinvention of myself. The first half of my life, I spent as a scientist, but anything that I did was with this service mindset. So I wound up building great cultures inside of these organizations that I was leading. And I realized that not only were they more profitable, and people more productive, but it provided more purpose and meaning inside of these workplaces. Mm-hmm. And so I got to a point after halfway through my career that I realized that I needed to do that for a living, whatever that was, and wound up reinventing myself the second half of my life and career and aligning myself not just to who I was and decided who I wanted to be and how I was that person, but also what I did. So servant leadership, which I'm now considered a thought leader in the world. I have a newsletter in LinkedIn called The Servant Leader with incredible followers all over the world. And I've done keynote speaking gigs at NASA, Northrop Grumman, or, around the country. Mm-hmm. But it's what I do for a living as a consultant. It's an organization I created called the Secret Sauce Society, which is the home for heart-centered, servant, more conscious leaders, people that want to provide meaning and purpose inside the workplace. And there's memberships, and I run mastermind groups, mm-hmm. and I'm a consultant in that space. So now who I am, how I be, what I do is all in alignment, one thing. And I'd like to tell you that, if anybody thinks that wants to strive for alignment in their life, like anything, nothing is easy. I, got kicked in the teeth. That went through lots of struggle, which I'm not now, but making that choice to mm-hmm. that reinvented, more purposeful way I wanted to live my life took time, but I'm here now. So that's really kind of why I do what I do, because it was literally, I was surrounded by it in my childhood and I saw what it did for people. And then I started injecting it into work, into everything I did. And I realized that not only was it better for people inside of these companies and better for productivity and innovation and profitability, but it also provided me more joy and purpose in my life. So that's how I got here.
I got to ask, when it comes to servant leadership, you mentioned giving and what's in it for them. how did you or how do you bridge the gap between, giving and this many meetings a day and it's all about them? How does it come back to you? Because I've heard of people that just give and give and give and their business is going nowhere. And then you hear about the tyrants and whatnot and the go-getters, what's in it for me, that become millionaires or billionaires. When you give as a servant leader, how does it come back to you? What's that bridge
So
look like?
that's a great question. And people tell me, look, Andrew, I do what you say to do, and it just doesn't work. And I ask them this very simple question: do you do it, and are you committed to it every day? And the answer is almost always no. I do it sporadically. And let me tell you something. Everybody wants breakthrough in their life, Mark. Everybody does, in their personal life, at work. And I asked them, how does breakthrough happen? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, then how did you learn how to ride a bicycle? There was that moment where you like, oh my God, I got it. I can balance and I can do this. And I asked them, they're like, well, the answers I get back is, well, I had training wheels. I felt it just kept falling off and getting on, or somebody helped me. And I said, those are good answers. But here's the best answer: you got on it every day. If you had got on it every other week, once every other month, breakthrough would never happen. Breakthrough happens from a commitment to one thing every day. And I was and have been committed to it every single day. And that's how it comes back, because consistency matters, my friend.
So how do you, I got to ask it because I'm thinking it now. Someone listening or watching is probably thinking it too. How do you find the one thing?
Oh, well, that's a great question. And that's a lot of soul searching. But I think most people don't take the time to regularly reflect on their days. I take the time every day. I take 10 to 15 minutes a day at the end of my day to reflect what went well, what didn't. If it didn't, what could I have done better? What could I have changed to make that outcome better? Even though we like to blame bad outcomes on things outside of us, which those are real forces. But if you focus on what you can control, which are the things that we're doing, how we're thinking, how we're behaving, how we're reacting, there is this false narrative that we think outside forces are more in control of us than us. But the real truth is, to learn how to get out of your own way is a big part of it. So, how you get to that one thing that you're asking, I think, is on reflection and what you feel. You should start thinking about where your happy places are. And to me, I define a happy place as something you're doing, or a physical place you are, where you're just naturally present. You're naturally just happy, whether they be occupational things or things for pleasure. Where are those happy places? A lot, when I ask people where their happy place is, very often they choose places like, well, I love to go to the beach, or I love the mountains. Well, how often do you go? Well, I go once, a few times a year. I'm like, no, no, no. You have to have happy places that you can visit every day, or almost every day, because consistency. If you go to that happy place, it's in those places usually where those one things will show up for you. For me, it was very evident, Mark, because I was surrounded by people that were larger than life. My mother, my father, my grandparents, they were larger than life. And I was like, I want to be like them. And that leads me to the last part of answering your question. Find somebody in your life that you know personally, or you've seen in YouTube or professionally, that you admire, And what is it you admire about them in how they're living their life? And is it something you want to be more like? Um, and it really is something you have to do soul searching on. It isn't just, oh, there, you write down a list and it's those things. It's, you've got to reflect. It takes time. It's not something that just, you know, that, comes to you. For some people, it is. For some people, it's very hard. And then they have to judge, well, I need to make money. I have a mortgage. I have bills. And that doesn't mean you stop what you're doing, but you still need to do that soul searching so then you can figure out a way and a plan to align yourself. So you have to come to that clarity first. So I hope that helps.
Well, it does. And with servant leadership, once you become, once you embrace servant leadership and you start living it, leadership is one of the two words. With great power comes great responsibility. Once you start living servant leadership, what do you think the responsibilities then become of being a servant leader to those around you?
There are many, but I'll give an example to your audience what most can identify with. Did you ever see the show Ted Lasso?
I saw like one episode, but it was a long time
Okay.
ago.
So Ted Lasso is a very popular show. So many that have seen the show will be able to identify with this. What he did, it's a story about this guy who was a Division III football coach in America who gets this gig to manage a Premier League soccer team, and he didn't know anything about soccer, nothing. And he turns that team into a more winning team without even knowing anything about soccer. How did he do that? He did that, and this is a very powerful thing. As a leader, he chose to immerse himself in their lives, not just in their roles. And I'm going to say it again. He immersed themselves in their lives and showed up for them in their lives, not just their work and in their roles. And servant leaders, that's exactly what they do. They immerse themselves in the people that they interact with in their lives, and they show up for them in incredible, meaningful ways to make them, to help be that driving force in their life to be the best they can be in every way. And that really, truly is servant leadership in its essence. And when you do that, not only do people appreciate it, become more loyal, and very importantly, communicate to you um, very openly and honestly what's hard to talk about is how you get to the best place. Because what's lacking in most organizations in the world, people ask me, Andrew, what makes a culture truly great? And if you ask an HR person, they'll give you a more mechanical answer. Well, you have to have these policies in place and you have to run these kind of things where there's these team building things. And while that's true, really what makes a culture truly great, Mark, is when people feel safe to communicate what isn't safe. It's called psychological safety. And if you can create an environment where people feel safe to communicate what isn't, now you can get to incredible communication. And that really is the essence of building great productivity, great cultures, and great profitability. And I hope that answered your question.
Well, it does. I have another question about being a leader. Once you become a leader, how do you, or do you, and if you do, how do you then develop other servant leaders to come up in life in the
Well, when
servant
you
leadership
show
role?
up for somebody in their life, when you show up and you give them skills that they're not aware of, because leadership, I always say that 90% of all leaders are actually not. They're just people in positions of authority. And leadership, Mark, is not the exercise of authority, it's the exercise of influence. And what more powerful way is there to influence somebody in their work and in their life, then through love, listening, understanding, kindness, it's the most powerful force of influence. And if you show up in that way for them, then you're showing them how to do that for others. Similarly, and the opposite, if you yell at people, you're giving your managers the permission to yell at their people. And never forget, people don't quit their jobs, Mark. They quit their managers. And managers typically don't have leadership skills. They're very good at what they did. They produced results and they get into a management role, but they don't know a lot of these soft skills. Like one of the things I always say is when you show up for a very important meeting, do you know how you want to be seen? And most people are like, well, they have to think it through. And I'm like, no. You can't think it through. You have to be clear. Let's say you want to be seen as somebody who's a great listener, somebody who actually gives a shit, somebody who goes the extra mile. And let's say you're about to open the door, walk into this meeting you're going to lead, and you go through those, but let's say 5 things in your head. I want to be seen this way. And then you go in there and you use what I call the power of intention. You intend to be seen that way. What do you think the odds are you'll be seen that way versus having no clarity or no intention at all? It's a duh. So there's hundreds of these little things that most people don't understand about leadership that they have to learn and practice every day. So servant leadership happens through not only you being the servant leader, but also teaching them how, because people think as leaders, all I have to do is act a certain way and expect them to act that way because I'm acting that way. And while some will, still most won't. You have to show up for them in their life and keep them accountable and help them see that. And then once you turn, let's say, a right-hand person or a manager into that, then they can then teach and spread that to others in the organization.
That is awesome. And we have covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. Someone's listening or watching and thinking, he said a lot of great things. I'm digging servant leadership. If you were to say, if you're going to adopt a life of servant leadership, at least do this, at least do this one thing, what would you tell them to do?
Self-reflection. So there's 3 buckets of practice. I always say, if you're not practicing something, what are you getting good at? And the answer is, well, nothing, right? You got to practice. And most people practice 2 of the 3 types of practice. They practice things related to them making money, right? Lawyers have to constantly practice new laws, doctors, new medicines, new techniques. All of us practice things related to making money. The second bucket of practice is we practice things that we derive pleasure from. Like I love to play golf. I practice, right? The third bucket of practice is the practice I call of being. And what is this? And very few people practice it. And even fewer of those that practice it on a daily basis. And that's how breakthrough happens, remember? So this practice of being, reflection is one of those practices. If you can, without attachment, observe your behavior, observe your thoughts, observe the outcomes that habitually result from these thoughts, from these behaviors. And instead of being the emotion, look at the emotion, look at the behavior, look at your day and say, what went well? What didn't go well? What could I have done better? How do I need to think about this differently? How do I need to react about this differently? Where it's not about what happens to you and the emotion you feel from it. You detach. One of the laws of success, Mark, is called spiritual laws of success is called the law of detachment. And the Buddha said, and I'm not Buddhist, but Buddha was a pretty rad dude. He said, all suffering comes from attachment. And if you noodle on that, it's so true. What we have to learn, so that one thing in answer to your question is spend time every day in reflection. It will make you better. It will help you uncover your blind spots. And when you are working on yourself constantly, you will be better, not just for yourself, but for others and the organization and the directive that you're all working toward.
This has been awesome. If people want to find you online, where's the best place or places to go?
So I'm a big LinkedIner. I've maxed out in LinkedIn. I have 30,000 connections because of my newsletter. My name is Andrew Kolikoff, as you know, KOLIKOFF. Connect with me in LinkedIn. Check out my newsletter. I have an organization called the Secret Sauce Society, which is the home for heart-centered, servant-hearted leaders. Or you can, I'm a consultant. I am a fractional chief culture officer for companies. I do leadership development. You can go to kolikoff.com. I do lots of speaking. I've been a keynote all over. And I'll end on this. Most people, Mark, write or speak to inform. I would say over 95%. I do not. I can get information and I can get lots of it on YouTube from many different viewpoints. I far less focus on giving information and I far more focus on using information to make people think and make them think so much that they may even challenge their own beliefs. So I invite you to check me out, reach out to me, say hello. If you're struggling with something, maybe I can serve you and help you in some way.
This has been awesome. Thank you again, Andrew. I appreciate the time.
Mark, you're doing so good in what you're doing in this world. Don't stop. And the questions that you ask are always so dead on. Even if you have a bad day, keep doing what you do. Keep doing what you do. You're good at it, and the world needs more people like you in it.
Thank you again. I appreciate it, Andrew. And scene.